Welcome back. There is, of course, increasing pressure for a change of guard in the executive to completely look at how the turnaround strategy in government is going to gain credibility. Does this mean a cabinet reshuffle is on the cards? Joining me to discuss these issues is Wits economics lecturer Lumkile Mondi, political commentator Ebrahim Fakir from ASRI, and of course also eNCA political reporter Samkele Maseko. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to The Fix.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lumkile, let me start with you. Two ministers have fallen on their sword. But when we opened the papers this morning, we heard that the president has now going to pay back the money. We heard ANC stalwart saying the campaign was run like an American campaign. Does he have the space within the African National Congress to effect more changes right now?
He's been very clear earlier on, after being appointed in December last year, that he's the man of unity. So therefore, that really curtails any power I might have. So I doubt it. I think here was a president who's working on compromises within the party, given the factions, and wants to go to the election in May with the United Party. Therefore, no, I think he's got no space at all to do any major change.
The problem for him, though, Ebrahim Fakir, is that it's not just up to him. There are political parties that have actually brought court action and argued that, for example, someone like Batabile Dlamini should not serve in the state. It brings another dimension to the issue of change in the governing party. How is that going to impact on the considerations of the president whether or not to move against anyone at this stage?
Well, I mean, the trend has been that actually Cyril Ramaphosa waits for a weight of evidence before he purportedly acts, because we're not sure whether he acts or whether the two individuals who actually did resign did so on the basis of other considerations and a whole range of other considerations. Some of them are about the weight of evidence against them. Now, in the case of Batabile Dlamini, for example, or Nomvula Mokunyane, for that matter, people who the pressure is on the president to get rid of, the reality is that there is sufficient evidence already for the way in which they have behaved in public office, in which they've bent and broken the rules so flagrantly that he has the basis on which to act. But if you think about the way in which Malusi Gigaba or Nhlanhla Nene actually left office, they didn't leave because of pressure from the president. And so I think Lumkile is right. He's waiting in this fractious environment for a reason and a rationale, not to act, but to wait for people and then subtly nudge whether they actually do something or not. The expectations for him to be much more decisive are actually high. And if he doesn't deliver on those expectations, his credibility itself will slowly erode.
Samkele, you follow the African National Congress very closely. We've now had a situation where we know the factional battle is only increasing. In fact, it is almost reaching a peak. President Zuma this weekend told everyone they must vote for the African National Congress, and what will be resolved inside the party. Malusi Gigaba is saying that his fight back will come, and of course the first thing that is going to happen is the list conference that is going to indicate who people want. There's strong indications that people are trying to use this list process as a way to neutralize Cyril Ramaphosa himself, and of course the NGC is going to assist them in doing that. What is your understanding of how this list process will be used to weaken the president, to reimagine the fortunes of those that were displaced at Nasrec?
You know, I always say you need to take things in a historical basis. You go back to the 2005 ANC NGC, if I'm not mistaken, to the 2015 ANC NGC, and you look at the historical one that took place at the University of Pretoria.
Yes.
Just after, if I'm not mistaken, before Mangaung.
Yes.
As we're going to Mangaung. You look at how, actually 2005, when former President Mbeki wanted to remove Jacob Zuma as the deputy president of the ANC, it was the ANC NGC there that said, no, you don't have the power to remove the deputy president of the ANC, only a conference. So theoretically, this notion that the 2020 NDC of the ANC can remove Cyril Ramaphosa or Ace Magashule as SGO president is a facade. It's not going to happen. The ANC NGC does not have the powers to do that. Then when it comes to the president, and if he's got constrained powers to remove any minister or not any minister, if you are going to any conference with any political organization, you minimize conflict within your own party in order to maximize opportunity for you to have a more broader and more massive electoral win. So it would be stupid of anyone to think Cyril Ramaphosa would decisively just go for it and just fire Batabile Dlamini. As Lumkile and Ebrahim Fakir have said, he waits for process, he waits for information to pile up, and then he acts. But the question is, does he act alone, or is he strong-armed by the ANC's Treasurer General, Paul Mashatile, who many people don't see is actually the Prime Minister of South Africa rather than Pravin Gordhan?
Okay, now here Samkele has thrown us into a really interesting mix. He's talking about the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa is the president. The EFF has tried to suggest that Pravin Gordhan is actually running the country. Samkele Maseko is saying that Paul Mashatile is actually the real power in the African National Congress. He's the man who's managing the machinations. In your view, Lumkile, does Paul have appetite for a reshuffle? Will he bring pressure to bear on President Ramaphosa to reshuffle, considering that there's court action, that the party isn't on its own in making this decision?
In fact, you must remember that Gauteng took a stand in the past in Mangaung around the candidates, and consistently, even in the municipal elections in 2016, they refused to have President Zuma's
face on the T-shirt,
on the T-shirt and everywhere else. And in the run-up to December, they were very, very clear that they support their candidate was Ramaphosa. So they locked themselves into that coalition. So therefore, what Samkele is talking about is that relationship that we've seen developing, where there's a cement relationship around where they want to go. Because how we see Gauteng ourselves as Gauteng residents, we see the ANC in Gauteng historically in a different light than the organization as a whole. That there's a lot of intellectual rigor there. So therefore, to your question, he's got so much power, the Treasurer General, and I think there is a lot of conferring and strategizing
and horse
trading around where we want to go.
Now, Ebrahim, the African National Congress in Gauteng is always seen as slightly different. They are more open, they're more theoretical, and this is the first time they actually managed to pull off an elective conference where their candidate won, because they haven't done it before. But if one looks at governance in Gauteng, they are in deep, deep trouble. We have Life Isidimeni. We have a situation where Brian Hlongwa was forced to resign just now. And then, of course, we have the issue of e-tolls. We saw how they tried to own the issue that they had implemented as a government, because they realized they're crunching the numbers. They know that voters in Gauteng are, like we say on the Cape Flats, gatvol. And so even though they may wield power in the ANC, what are their chances at the polls, given that they lost the richest municipality in 2016?
Well, I mean, I think that's frankly where the difficulty is. The Gauteng ANC's electoral fortunes have never been fantastic. Sure. They've always been in the mid to low 50s in every successive election. And now they've lost 2 metros in the entire province. And the third, in Ekurhuleni, they literally won through a informal coalition.
Yeah, it's being stitched together with plastic.
Precisely. So they've got a serious problem here, and their problem is twofold. A, it's the fractiousness inside the ANC, and I'm not sure that I agree with Samkele that Paul Mashatile is as all-powerful as he might be suggesting. There may be horse trading, but a Treasurer General historically has never played a fundamental policy role. They played some kind of organizational role. But since Matthews Posa was in fact made Treasurer General, that Treasurer General has started playing an increasingly policy-making and organizational role in that.
That person also increasingly becomes known as Mr. 10%.
Of course it does, because they hold the purse strings.
Yes.
Sure. Now, Mashatile's problem is that he has to play a national role, but he's still trying to horse trade within the province.
Sure.
And he's translating provincial problems and imprinting it onto a national picture, but the dynamics nationally are completely different. And then you overlay all of that from problems in the Western Cape. And you've got an organizational mess. Because apart from the fractiousness that's going on factionally, there are also provincial problems. And those two big provinces overlay their problems onto the national ANC. And Ramaphosa may have command of both of these provinces because they genuinely support him. But I don't think they're sufficiently powerful to enable him to make the kind of decisions we would all like him to make. And I think he realizes that.
Yeah. One of the things I want to talk to you about, Samkele, is the fact that Professor Turok raised a very important point about succession in the African National Congress, which they, of course, refused to deal with or modernize. And, of course, now we found out that there was a fund, business people funded, and we, of course, know there was a fund from Nkosazana as well. We know bags of money was at the conference all the time, even though people like Nomvula Mokonyane and others denied it. But here's the thing. The ANC was technically insolvent at that conference. We know what it cost to run an election campaign, right? We have an election that is going to, when did the president say? May?
May.
Is going to be happening in May. Does the ANC have the money to mount the kind of election campaign that you see in a global world, where you have things like social media, where you have influencers, where you have to do grassroots work, where a machinery has to go out and, you know, get bums on seats, when people are killing each other at municipal level for who's going to be the council?
Well, I think the president's investment drive and the investment conference, which he just had under his cap as the president of the republic, getting in fact 290 billion rands of investment in the country, tells you and sums it up the ANC's financial situation. If business and capital can donate and give so much to Cyril Ramaphosa as the now president of the country in his capacity as the president of the republic, can you imagine what they are doing for him on an organizational level for his party, the ANC? For instance, when I say Paul Mashatile is arguably the most powerful person in South Africa right now, you look at how the ANC, NEC as a whole, is largely compromised by people from Gauteng. In that top 6 of the ANC, there are 3 people from Gauteng. It's Jesse Duarte, it's Paul Mashatile, it's Cyril Ramaphosa. Gauteng was the biggest winner at the Nasrec conference, even though people say it's in Mpumalanga. Didi Mabuza. Everywhere he goes as the deputy president of the country, Paul Mashatile is on his right-hand side. When he was in Africa recently, Paul was by his side. When he was in Europe recently, Paul Mashatile was by his side. What is Paul Mashatile doing in all of these trips? Is he not raising funds? Is he not meddling with the so-called captains of industry? You look in South Africa right now. When you say, Ebrahim says, when the Paul Mashatile is translating factions from Gauteng to a national scale, who's not translating factions of their province to a national scale? Didi Mabuza is doing the same.
Well, of course, Natal is certainly doing that.
So you look at how the president is backing and is supporting David Mabuza's health condition. Each time he goes to Russia, it's on an official trip, disguised as if he's going to see the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Then recently he takes a sick leave, non-sick leave, is not ill. He goes to Russia. Who's footing the bill for all of this? Those are the questions we need to ask. And what is the influence of the Treasurer General? Because going to that conference, it was DD who was saying to the Nkosazana Dlamini faction, accommodate Paul. This side with the Cyril faction, Paul and Gwede were the ones saying accommodate DD. How come DD got away with having 2 branches operating in 1 branch, as the recent letter that was sent out by the SG Ace Makashule? It means Gwede and all of them are collaborating with David Mabuza. So I would say the president is somewhat in a constrained position. He has to merge all of these factions together. But even historically, when you look at former President Zuma, when he took power after the 2007 conference, 2009, he was not so brutal against Thabo Mbeki's supporters. Even though there was a max exodus from parliament, those who stayed like Trevor Manu enjoyed some sort of support from him through the likes of influence of people like PG, Pravin Gordhan. But fast forward to today, Cyril Ramaphosa is employing the same tactic that Jacob Zuma employed. And the question is, many people say in the ANC circles, you can never separate Cyril Ramaphosa and Jacob Zuma. They were Secretary General and Deputy Secretary General together. They know one another
in fact,
more than any other individual.
That dispatched Jacob Zuma to disband Ismagashole's provincial executive. Lumkile, we are talking about a party that is facing the toughest election it will ever have to go in since the advent of democracy. It's fractious, it doesn't have money, it's courting business, and of course it has people who are alleged to have committed such wrongdoing on a scale that academics compared it to a coup. Is this party in any position to assume that it is able to win all the provinces and that it is able to win with a large enough majority to rule that will give the president the opportunity to really then pick his team? Because this cabinet was inherited. President Zuma was not fired, so, you know, President Ramaphosa fired 10 people, but he had certain people to stay. If he wins, whatever the conditions, does he then have the ability to wield power like a president will have to wield power?
Not at all. You must remember the factions that are supporting President Ramaphosa. Is business mainly, and then those factions within the trade unions and the South African Communist Party. It's a coalition really that's got its own interests, not a coalition that want to build an inclusive economy, a coalition that will change the macroeconomic trajectory of our country, ensuring that the 27.5 unemployment is addressed. They're not there. They're there to safeguard the interest of the party, as President Trump argued, that the ANC is interested in power. It's got no economic strategy. But business also wants to ensure that it's sustainable. So it's got a very good candidate that they're backing. However, whether that coalition, even the coalition that President Trump is talking about, whether it will advance our interests as a country of inclusivity, of a better life for all, that remains questionable. That is why civil society and broader masses of our people need to be vigilant so that we force the new compromise. And that compromise requires us, outside government, outside this institution, to put pressure on the state to deliver on the promise by inclusivity, requiring a radical economic transformation of a new macroeconomic framework.
Ebrahim, a final question to you. We're running out of time, and 30 seconds. He's not going to do a cabinet reshuffle, but can he do nothing?
No, he can't afford to do nothing. But I mean, the reality is he's going to wait, as Lumkile is suggesting, post the 2019 election. And my view is that if he gets enough of a majority, but not too much that allows the ANC to rule the roost completely, he needs a majority of 62% plus. As soon as he has 62% plus, he can be a lot more decisive in how he deals with the different factions and says, listen, I've brought you to power. If he fails, if the ANC fails to put him into power with a 62% plus majority, then his detractors in the ANC force a discussion at the NGC about him having to vacate office. Sure.
Gentlemen, thank you so very much for the discussion. That's my expert panel, Lumkile Mondi, Ebrahim Fakir, and of course, Samkele Maseko. See you after the break for a look at the stories making headlines this Sunday, and of course, what will keep you talking Monday.